Hello and welcome to another episode of the Wildcast podcast. This is Michael Lev with the Arizona Daily Star. I am joined by Bruce Pascoe, who is live on the scene in Kansas City, Missouri for the Big 12 men's basketball tournament. Bruce is joining us from the interview room where I believe Commissioner Brett Yormark addressed the masses a little bit ago. We'll talk about that with Bruce, among other things. Welcome to the podcast, Bruce. Hope your time in the great Midwest has been favorable so far.
Yeah, I've been here. I spent a lot of time here in the last 2 months. I feel like
have the last 5 days felt like 2 months, Bruce?
Well, yeah, I try to get a break from it a little bit, and just do some different stuff. But doing our preseason special section and daily stories and voting for this or that. I mean, it's pretty much been sitting in a hotel anyway. It doesn't really. I could be anywhere in America right now, really.
Of course, I have felt that way many times covering the Super Bowl over the years. You just sort of end up in a hotel or in some big convention hall where you really can't tell where you are.
Right.
It's nice if you can walk around a given city. Is the walking scene pretty good there where the arena is in Kansas City?
Yeah. In downtown, it's like a classic kind of Midwestern downtown. There's, they put in what they call this power and light district with a lot of bars and restaurants right across from the arena. But there's some other, and there's like a jazz neighbor district near, sort of adjacent to downtown. There's some, it's walkability. It's certainly got a lot better. I came here once a long time ago when Arizona was playing, and it was not like downtown Kansas City was not where you wanted to be, but it's a little better that way now. And then, there's a lot of, museums. There's a streetcar they're building out that's going farther away down towards the Plaza neighborhood, so it's definitely getting better. And yeah, it's walkable for sure. I've done a lot of that.
Yeah, I went with a friend to the North Carolina-Kansas game in the fall, and we flew into Kansas City, of course, as one does. And we actually went to Kansas City, Kansas, to visit the Negro League Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum, which is really, really cool. I strongly suggest that if anyone is going to Kansas City, that they take a little detour and check that out if they can. Of course, people are not used to Kansas City being the site of a conference tournament for the Arizona Wildcats. They are much more used to it being in Las Vegas. So this is a big shift for the Wildcats, for their fans. I'm sure not quite as many fans are going to be in Kansas City as were in Vegas on a regular basis, which led to the town being nicknamed McKale North. How would you describe what the vibe is like there in Kansas City compared to what most fans have become used to in Vegas?
Yeah, I mean, it's early, but I can tell you I'm already seeing a lot of Iowa State Cyclones gear, and they're not even playing till tomorrow. And like literally right now, it's what is this? Oklahoma State and Cincinnati, I think. And there's like nobody there except some Iowa State fans. Basically, it's kind of crazy. But I mean, everything I've heard is that it's KU and Iowa State fans. The difference is that Iowa State fans are mostly traveling to get here, so they're the ones that are hanging around the bars and restaurants and hotels, and whereas the KU fans are a lot local, or they're driving over from Lawrence, or they live here in Kansas City. So, but there's going to be a lot of those too. And then I think Arizona will be fairly well represented, but I think the difference is they will not. It doesn't sound like they will be able to dominate. They'll be drowned out by these. Especially if they do end up playing Kansas on Thursday, they're going to be drowned out by KU fans. There's just almost no way that Arizona will have that kind of numbers. I think they'll, a lot of Arizona fans who live in this part of the country, I'm sure, will be here, and then probably some will travel, but it's just a different deal. I mean, it's they enjoyed a huge advantage to Las Vegas, and that's one of those collateral damages of them moving to the Big 12 as they lose that tournament advantage they've had.
It's Utah against UCF, right, in the 11 versus 14 matchup. And then the winner of that game faces Kansas, and then the winner of that game faces Arizona. So obviously Kansas will be a heavy favorite against either one of those teams, basically playing a quote-unquote home game. We just saw Arizona against Kansas. That was the last game of the season. Obviously a different kind of vibe when you're talking about senior day. Bill Self has got a ridiculous record on senior day. Hunter Dickinson had the best game of his career, basically.
Yeah, you could say that.
A little surprising considering that, Arizona's generally defended bigs pretty well. I mean, that's kind of what they're somewhat known for under Tommy Lloyd, is having some, a stable of big guys.
That's
sort of shut down the opponent, but was not the case. So let's just assume here for a minute that it's going to be Arizona versus Kansas part 2. What can Arizona do differently to maybe flip the outcome if that happens?
Well, I mean, that's part of it, is they got to figure out a way to deal with Dickinson. But I mean, again, if he's on like that and he's motivated, I mean, it seems like there's a little bit of the dysfunction that's hit that team, and maybe they're getting over that now. But man, when he's on, he's not only really skilled in a lot of ways, but he's a 5th-year player. He's 7'2". How does Tobe Waka guard him? How does Henry Basar, who maybe matches up with him height-wise, he's just not been around as long as Dickinson has. He's a crafty player. He was even hitting some mid-range shots. So they've got to figure out a way, and maybe switching different guys in them. I don't know. It's going to be tricky, but that's definitely part of it. And then I think a lot of it is we've seen obviously most of the last 4 or 5 games they've really had trouble defending on the perimeter, and that's never been a huge emphasis. There's other things they'll emphasize more defensively than. But that being said, they've still really let down defensively with 3 points, and particularly sounds like a lot of miscommunication going on. So that's been a little troubling for them. I think they defended Kansas pretty well from the perimeter in the first half in that game. Second half, not so much, but again, a little bit of that probably is due to senior day, and they're just. I mean, that place was just unbelievably electric. I mean, that's as good as it gets for a college basketball atmosphere. Those guys were motivated. Some of them were 5th-year, 4th-year guys going out, and I think Tommy Lloyd said at one point, who was it? I think Zeke Mayo. He described Zeke Mayo twisting around and shooting from 30 feet, and he just put up his hands. He's like, "Hey, what do we do? Tackle him?" So there's a little bit to that too, and it'll be interesting. I think maybe if they can get to DeJuan Harris a little better, and disrupt him, and that's easier said than done. But he really set the table for them. 9 assists and I think 1 turnover the other game. And if they can get into him, disrupt him, and maybe get some easy baskets out of that could maybe change it too.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a pick your poison situation. You can choose to double team when Dickinson gets the ball in the post, but when you do that, you run the risk of leaving outside shooters open. Kansas really hadn't been a great 3-point shooting team most of the season, right? I mean, sort of similar to Arizona. I think perimeter shooting has been one of their bugaboos, but they're obviously hitting in that game. So, I don't think you can defend everything. Arizona really hasn't defended anything lately. But you know what, Bruce, I'm glad you brought up kind of the elephant in the room a bit, the atmosphere at Allen Fieldhouse. What was the question that prompted Tommy Lloyd to say what he did, kind of comparing.
McKale, that's so interesting you say that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry to interrupt you. It's interesting you say that. Troy Hutchinson actually asked that. He came to the game and from Go AZ, he said he basically asked Tommy Lloyd, how did you adjust to Kansas, meaning on the court? And then Tommy Lloyd just took it a completely different direction and talked about, well, the first thing to adjust to was the crowd. Which maybe there was some truth to that, because they had to kind of regroup after that first half and figure out how to deal with it and how to communicate and this and that. And then I followed up by asking him, because we were way up at the top in the corner, so like it was loud, but I couldn't really tell. So I said, "Hey, we're up the top. What was it like on the floor? Do you have troubles communicating?" And then he went on about how his ears were ringing and he really credited them, but I think the main thing was he was just talking about the adjustment, and he went into this thing saying, "Hey, there's a gap between Iowa State and Kansas and U of A," and he said, "I love U of A, whatever," he said, but he's saying, basically, I think he's a little frustrated. It's not more like that, but then again, Kansas and Iowa State, they're literally 2 of the top college basketball atmospheres in America. I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, it's just tough to say that McKale is going to be like that.
Yeah, Kansas is right up there probably with Duke, as maybe the two best atmospheres in all of college basketball. I didn't think, just watching on TV, that Iowa State was at that level, but that may have had something to do with the sound mix or something from ESPN. It just, the crowd wasn't really coming through on the broadcast as much, but they have a really good home environment too. I just wonder about the timing of those comments, like, why bother saying it? Like, does, after you just sort of had a happy ending to the season at McKale, you got on the mic and thanked the crowd and all that stuff.
Well,
like, why go there?
I just think he is frustrated by the game and a little bit by the atmosphere. One thing I can say is, like, and they didn't really announce it at U of A that they were going to have speeches after the game, but after the game on Tuesday against ASU, they took the mic after the game. Tommy Lloyd passed around all the seniors. There was literally like maybe 1,000 people left in McKale at that point. And granted, it was late.
Because they didn't announce it. No one, I don't think anyone knew it was going to happen.
Yeah.
And it was like 11:30 at night on a Tuesday.
It was not, right.
So that's not
necessarily right. It's not necessarily the fans' fault. And at Kansas, they made an announcement, hey, stay put. We're going to have announcement. Players are going to blah, blah, blah. And it's 5:30 in the afternoon or whatever it was at that point. And, nobody's in any hurry to go anywhere. And literally almost everybody stayed. In fact, I was really worried because we were way up high. And I thought, how the heck are we going to get downstairs to the interview room when this game gets over and in time for the if Arizona loses, they're going to go first and they're going to be fast because they're going to be upset and they're going to want to get on the charter plane and come home. So that's always a concern of mine, that I'm going to have time to run down there. But there was no problem because everybody stayed in their seats. I just walked on down right past everybody. And, but anyway, the bottom line is it's just, a different atmosphere, and I think it's just the way it is. It's just that it's a little stronger culture, and it's not, I mean, Arizona has one of the strongest cultures on the West Coast as far as, atmospheres and people wanting to be part of it, support that program. So, it's just different. I mean, that's what they found all over the Big 12. I mean, even Cincinnati, Texas Tech, Kansas State was really good, and Iowa State, to answer your question, was really good too. I think the difference there was that they have these theater seats, and it wasn't quite as loud, maybe not as many people, and it just kind of was a cushy environment. But they were really into it. But at Kansas, they've got bench seating, and it's crammed, and it's it's that big field house environment. It just like it sets you up to make for a loud atmosphere. It's just unlike very few other places.
Yeah, I thought, I mean, obviously when I went, it was North Carolina. It was this historic occasion. They hadn't played North Carolina there in literally 65 years. I thought the students were more organized, and they were also on both ends of the court, which kind of amplified the effect a little bit. There are always things you can do to get better when whatever you're doing, whether it's the arena atmosphere or being a sports writer or whatever the case. I just thought the timing of those comments just felt a little off to me. And,
but I mean,
he regrets it a little bit.
I don't know. He might. I mean, but he did try to preface it a lot by saying, this is not against U of A fans, that, I love them, blah, blah, blah. And you've seen it maybe at home games too, where on a Saturday afternoon when it is kind of electric at McKale, he's coming in and somebody's asking him a question, and he twists that question into, it was great out there today. I just blah, 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 I'm so grateful. So I think there's that, but it's a tricky deal. I think it's just the heat of the moment. I think maybe he felt like in some ways that if that wasn't quite like that, maybe it would have made a difference. I don't know, but it's he's just he's a competitive guy, and I think that's the main thing. He'd like to see the playing field probably as level as possible, and but I mean, it's just, again, it's Kansas. I mean, when I looked at the schedule, I was like, okay, Iowa State, Kansas, back-to-back Saturdays on the road. They're going to lose both of those. Sorry, there's just no way. And that's what happened.
Yep.
So,
well,
it's really, when you look about it, it's really the home loss to BYU that killed them. It's not playing at Kansas.
Yes. Well, we will get to that very soon. I was just going to say that when someone says no offense and then they say something, or they say nothing personal and they say something, then usually offense is intended or it is personal. But anyway,
yeah,
so
I mean, yeah.
Arizona goes into this Big 12 tournament as the number 3 seed. They're 14-6 in the Big 12, which I think is probably better than most people thought they were going to do, especially when they were sub 500 in non-conference play. But it's like the sequencing of it, right? Like they were 11-1 in the Big 12, and then they lost 5 of their last 8. So if you just sort of move the pieces around a little bit, end up at the same place, maybe people think about it differently. But it felt like they kind of fell off a bit down the stretch. There were 2 games that most people, I think, feel like they should have won. One was at Kansas State. The other one was at home against BYU. I will say that I felt like there was going to be some game at some point that was kind of a letdown game or a trap game that they lost on the road. I thought it was going to be the BYU game on the road. They ended up winning that one. So they lose at Kansas State. And then the BYU game could have gone either way, the one at home. Obviously, there was a controversial call at the end.
Right.
And they're a really good team. I mean, like people think they could go to the Final Four. Like they're that good. So given all of that, what are your expectations for the Wildcats heading into this Big 12 tournament?
Well, there's a pretty good chance, like you said, that they're going to play Kansas. So I would say my expectations are pretty low for Arizona. Honestly, if that happens, it's going to be hard to turn it around in this kind of atmosphere. But there is something to be said for when you get that second crack at somebody right away. You can make adjustments. Maybe Kansas comes in a little less intense because they're thinking they're going to have another home game and take care of this team again. And, so it is possible. I mean, but yeah, I don't know. I think I've thought all along, I thought Arizona would actually do even worse on the road than they did. They actually surprised me winning some of the games they did, because like losing at Kansas State, because that's just those kind of environments they lead to, these are, they're basically, they've been around these guys, but they're still college players, younger players, and environments mean a lot. So it's hard to win on the road, and they've shown some pretty good fortitude about that. I thought maybe they'd only win 3 or 4 on the road all year, and they did better than that. I think they won more in the conference than I thought. They won less in the non-conference. So and to your point about the season. I think we've been saying all along that the schedule was backloaded, and so it's not a surprise that they fell off. A lot of that has to do with the schedule, and the Kansas State loss, right, did get away with them, but I thought that's a game I thought they would lose, but I thought they should have beaten BYU at home, but I also thought they'd lose at BYU. So who knows? I guess what I'm saying is I don't really know what to expect. That I don't have high expectations for them. If they do get past Kansas though and get some momentum, then watch out, because the way this lines up, they could definitely get to Saturday.
Right. So
probably get get BYU again though.
One of the guys who really struggled in Lawrence was KJ Lewis. I think he was 1 for 8 from the floor. If you look at his month-by-month splits, he's shooting under 40% in both February and March. For the season, he's at 17% from 3-point range. No one's really played up the fact that he's got this thing around his wrist that he's been playing with for a while, and it might be hard to do the splits and have it line up perfectly, that pre-injury and post-injury. One might theorize that maybe he was hurt before he started wearing the wrap, but something is up with KJ. Like, he is not as nearly as efficient as he was earlier in the season. He's not even as efficient as he was last year. We thought there was going to be a big jump this year in his offensive performance, but it really hasn't happened. So Is it the injury? Is it he's just kind of hitting a wall in his development? What do you think's going on with KJ?
I don't think it. Yeah, I think maybe the second's more true. The hit a wall in his development. It's been I think because and I'm sure that the injury may have hurt him a little bit, but he struggled earlier in the year too. I mean, that's one reason he dropped out of the starting lineup, and then they tried to see if they could get more out of him going back to that reserve role. that hasn't really played out. I mean, he's had a couple good games here and there, though. Certainly at West Virginia really stands out. He was, excellent in that game. He played pretty well against ASU last week, but a lot of guys did in that game. I think it's just, I think it's just one of those deals where he came in with such high expectations that he was going to have this, real jump this year. He had tested for the draft. He was, and I think, to your point, maybe he, if he had that little extra piece of offense, he just projected as maybe a guy who could maybe even get into the first round, and then that doesn't look like it. And you never know what's going on behind the scenes. Maybe there's pressure or whatever, and sometimes those things kind of snowball in the wrong direction when there's that much pressure on you and things aren't going the right way. But I do know that he seems to have pretty good family support, and certainly within the program, and so that shouldn't be a part of it. But I don't know. The interesting thing for U of A is that, maybe it means he is more inclined to come back for another year. So in that sense, there could be a silver lining for U of A.
There could be, for sure. I mean, he was sort of trending toward being a 3-and-D guy, but it's hard to be a 3-and-D guy when you can't hit threes, right? Then you're just a D guy. But
right.
he's still a very aggressive defender, maybe overly aggressive at times of late. But I think, when you get down to this point in the season, it's important for players to just kind of accept what their roles are and try to be the best at those roles that they possibly can. Someone whose role has sort of been hard to define this season is Trey Townsend. And one of the silver linings of that loss against Kansas with Henry Vesar in foul trouble and some other people struggling is Trey Townsend had his best game in a long, long time. He had 13 points in that game. That was his first game with 10 or more since January 21st. He hit 3 of 4 3-pointers. Those three 3-pointers were a season high. And he was really good for Oakland, obviously, in the tournament last year. So do you think maybe that will give him a boost of confidence and Arizona might be able to get more out of him than what they've gotten for most of the season?
Yeah, he's probably the biggest kind of puzzle, like trying to figure out why it really hasn't happened for him. I know in general, right, like he showed in the tournament that he can play the high majors, and then then given a chance to play high majors pretty much all the time, it's been a little trickier. And then lately he's had to adjust from not starting, and maybe that game last on Saturday, kind of that's the kind of game they're hoping to get out of him, come off the bench and do that kind of stuff, and actually play starters minutes, and he can do it. And that I honestly don't know, why they haven't seen more of that from him. But I mean, the whole post rotation's been, a little odd all year, the way it's worked with Krivas, and then Krivas being out and then having to shift guys into different roles, and then Besar coming on. And then because of that, and Besar didn't really come on until Krivas was out for sure. And then once he came on, then eventually they went to starting him, and then that moved Townsend to the bench for literally the first time in his career. I mean, the guy started every game in his career, 4 years at Oakland, and then to have to come off the bench, that's a big adjustment. Cedric Henderson a couple years ago did the high major thing where he came in as a 3-year starter, and coming off the bench wasn't working for him. That's why Pelle Larsson volunteered basically to come off the bench so Henderson can start, just because he was used to that. So I don't know. I've asked Tommy Lloyd about that, if it's a comparable situation. I didn't get that vibe, but you do kind of wonder.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if we're too late in the season for further tinkering of this with the starting lineup. I don't know if there's any more chess moves to be made right now. And if you're looking at another matchup against Kansas, you want to have as much size in your lineup as possible. And Trey is about 6'7" or so, really undersized 4. That's not a great matchup situation for them. But hey, if he can come off the bench and provide a spark again, he's been shooting the ball well from 3. They certainly can use that. He rebounded well in that game.
Yeah.
Like, gosh, if you can get like 10 points and 6 rebounds out of him, or 12 points and 7 rebounds, I think that's a big bonus. That's a bonus. Like, they haven't been getting that level of production for most of the season, at least most of the conference season.
Right. Yeah. Right. I don't think they will switch the the lineup or rotation, but obviously they shifted a lot of minutes at Kansas into Townsend, and that could happen again. It'll be interesting to see with Dickinson, like we were saying earlier, like, are they going to use those guys in different ways against Dickinson, and some little wrinkles here and there, and I expect that'll be the case.
So one more personnel thing I want to ask you before we get into some big picture things. Carter Bryant, do you feel like he's hitting the freshman wall a little bit here toward the end of the season? It seems like his minutes have dropped a bit. His production has dropped a little bit. Are you sensing that, or is it just circumstantial?
Yeah. I think that's probably pretty true. I mean, you do. Yeah, I'd say the last month or so, he's been just kind of a bit player, and they need more from him. I mean, he's hit about 1-3 a game, done some things here or there, but it's just been a puzzle too. And again, you don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but he is the guy. He's the highest projected guy. He's projected still to go in the first round. You got to think that either he's thinking about that or people around him are thinking of that, and that can put a lot of pressure and a lot of things going on within you, and nobody ever talks about that, but I know it's the case sometimes with guys like that in that position. So that could be part of it. Just and again, I think at Kansas, you're looking at the way Townsend was playing. I think that certainly took away some of his minutes there too. So it's some of it has to do with what other guys are doing, and the way Basar's played also has, they've kept him on the floor more, and that's taken away from what Bryant's been able to do.
If there is indeed like an internal pressure situation, if I were Tommy Lloyd, I would emphasize the idea of, hey, just go out and play, focus on one play at a time, play as hard as you can while you're out on the floor. Don't worry about all that other stuff, because it'll come in time, right? Like, just go out and do your best. Your talent will reveal itself, and all that stuff will happen later on, as it's supposed to, right? All you can really control is like your effort, how hard you play, you're making good decisions on and off the court, these types of things. But like you say, like, you never know what's going on. I mean, these guys are young. There's a lot of people around them who are, no doubt bringing up this and that. How come you're not getting more shots? How come you're not getting more minutes? All of these types of things.
So we all have agents now.
Yeah.
Well, they all have agents as well as families, and everybody's got a different mix of them. I think Carter is particularly fortunate, and his dad is a high school coach, played D1 basketball. He's pretty knowledgeable about what's going on. His mom, the athletic family, I think they, that probably helps. But who knows? There can be all kinds of situations guys are in with family and people around them, agents, etc.
So we had the Big 12 awards come out on Monday. Only one Arizona player made any of the teams, and that was Michael Lev, who made the first team. Toby Awaka and Henry Basar made honorable mention. Nobody got anything else. I was a little disappointed that Jaden Bradley's accomplishments were not recognized in any shape or form. It's kind of was the theme of this column I wrote about him. He's very understated, plays below the rim, doesn't do a lot of spectacular stuff. So maybe people don't notice like how good of a player he really is. Did anything about the Big 12 awards as it pertained to Arizona come as a surprise to you, Bruce?
Yeah, I thought Bradley, especially once I found out they had 10 guys on the first team. So that's 20 players they're honoring. And granted, there's 16 teams, but I thought, out of 20, you'd think that Bradley would maybe get on the third team there. And I thought maybe Lewis had a shot at all defensive, but no. I think the one thing that struck me is in the pack. I mean, these are coaches' votes. It's important to keep in mind these are the head coaches that vote for this, unlike the weekly awards, which are media. And a lot of times in the Pac-12, it was the whole mindset with a lot of them was, I'm going to reward the guys who are on the best teams, but I think in the Big 12 you're seeing a little more of like, these are just the best players, and it doesn't matter as much, because again, if Arizona had finished third in the Pac-12, they probably would have more guys represented in something like this, and just because they did finish third, and the coaches would be like, okay, well, who am I going to pick from that team? Because that team did pretty well. That didn't happen with Arizona this year. And in fact, I think if it was a 5-player first team, and if Bobby Hurley didn't vote for Caleb Love, it's possible he might have not even made the first team, because there's 5 really good players. There's more than 5 really good players in this league.
Oh man, nothing like holding a grudge when it comes to something.
Yeah,
like
I mean, I don't know if he actually
all conference
did that, but
team.
he certainly. Yeah, I don't know if he did that, but he certainly hinted that he would, and he claimed that game up in Tempe. I think that he kept saying a couple of guys. I think it was Bradley and Love, particularly, he was mad at. We're just talking too much, is what he thought. But who knows?
I guess I would just say scoreboard in response to that. So finally, Bruce, the NCAA tournament selection show is coming up on Sunday. We're recording this on Tuesday morning. Do you have any idea where Arizona is going to land as far as its seed line when it comes to the tournament selection show?
It's interesting because when they had that early reveal on the 15th, I think it was, and Arizona had 3 at that point. And typically, across the board, when they have that reveal, even though it feels like a long time till Selection Sunday, those mostly hold up. Teams usually stay at or within one line. And right now, Arizona's looking like a 5, maybe even a 6. So it's really, it's kind of interesting because they've lost, they lost to Houston after the selections were announced at that point, for the preliminary, and then obviously BYU, Iowa State, Kansas. And so but I think, obviously if they can beat Kansas if they get Kansas and beat them, that might even elevate them back. Of course, it always depends on what happens elsewhere, but but it does look like 5 or 6. But I think if they beat Kansas and or got the Saturday, they could get back into that 4 line, and I think that 4 line is key, because then you get generally you're leading a pod, so they generally put you as close to home as possible, and you're going to obviously playing lesser seeded teams than you would as a 5 or 6. I think there's some. You get to that 6 and you're playing, you might be playing a play-in team, maybe you're playing Xavier, who knows? I mean, that's not a place you want to be. And so, I think that's their mission this week, is they need to avoid that. And also, and more importantly, probably in the big picture, is they just need to get some momentum and kind of feel good vibes, because it's been a rough 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah, I completely agree. It'll be interesting to see how much the committee looks at strength of schedule. If I'm interpreting Ken Palm here correctly, he's got Arizona with the 11th most difficult strength of schedule in the nation, and number 4 in the Big 12, with Arizona State actually having the hardest within the conference, followed by Baylor, then Kansas, then Arizona. The rest are SEC and Big 10 teams, of course. Anyway, we've got to go. Bruce, we've got a meeting that we need to attend here in a couple of minutes. You've got games that you need to watch. You've got stories that you need to write. We thank you so much for taking a little bit of time out from your busy schedule there in Kansas City. This has been the Wildcast podcast. You can find us on Apple, on Spotify, on YouTube Music. Please subscribe, give us a 5-star review, and we will see you next time.
All right, thanks.